be proud and like grateful for you still being able to do it. Like Corey always says, I am not a band guy. I'm a guy who plays in a band, and it is no longer the priority. It's the cherry on top of like all this amazing stuff we get to do.
I'm Adam, and it's really nice to meet you. And this is a podcast about you and your journey in music. And we'll talk about the new album and everything.
Cool. Yeah, that works.
Sweet. So are you born and raised in Toronto?
Yeah. We're just outside, like by half an hour or so.
Oh, okay. That's where you grew up and everything?
Yep.
What was that like? Cold?
Colder when we were younger. I don't know. I feel like Toronto is so close to the States that it's probably pretty similar to New York or something, just less people.
Sure. And it's a big music city.
And it's a huge music city. Yeah.
So growing up, would you go, were you fairly close to the city, and would you go check out bands there and everything?
Yeah. I think when I was 14, there was like a local scene in our town that was like 30 minutes out. And all the like pockets around Toronto in the greater Toronto area all had like their little either hardcore or punk or emo scene.
Mhm.
And when you're 14, you're just stoked to go listen to music. Doesn't really matter what it is.
100%. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I could speak for probably the whole band. That's probably how all of us got into music, even though like our guitarist lives 5 hours away. It was the same thing for him. Our drummer was born and raised like 10 hours away from Toronto, and it was the same thing for him. Like, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know if that's normal in the States to just have all these little pockets of, music scenes everywhere, but
yeah, it is. I mean, at least I don't know. I'm old now. So when I was growing up, that was kind of it. I grew up in San Diego, and there was a music scene there. And then
yeah,
you go up to Orange County or LA or whatever. And there was all these little pockets of, bands that were all kind of similar genres at the time, punk, emo, that whole scene.
Yeah.
But now I don't know. There really isn't a whole lot of venues. I moved to Nashville, and there's more all age venues here, but
Yeah, for sure.
in San Diego, there once they kind of dump more of those independent ones, and it's like House of Blues or these bigger places that if you're not drawing,
Right.
1,000 people, then it's hard to
I think
get a local gig.
For at least the shows that we were going to, I guess we're primarily hardcore shows, so it wasn't necessarily something being held in like a venue, quote
Sure.
unquote.
Yeah, like a DIY type
It'd be a
thing.
DIY space, or a basement, or like someone's apartment downtown, or like the back of an auto garage or something like that.
Yeah,
But there was shit happening all the time.
that's
I guess
cool.
there's
Yeah.
still- yeah,
Yeah, I mean, we had stuff like there's a few clubs that would hold maybe 150 people.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of the bands would go. Some teen centers and stuff that would have shows. I mean, I guess rarely would, or at least I wasn't going to as many of like the house concerts. I mean, there were, I guess, in high school and stuff, but yeah, there was actual like legit places that you could play, like a teen center that had like 200 cap, or
yeah, that's sweet.
and they'd get a big-ish band coming through. I mean, like I remember Ataris used to come through all the time, like before they really got big with like MTV and everything. And you could see them, and then you'd have like 4 local openers, and
Yeah.
it was a cool thing. I don't really see that much there any longer.
Yeah, I don't know if it's always been this way. I'm just older now, so I'm kind of more like privy to how things work. But
Yeah.
it seems like now certain venues are really dominated by like a booking agent, or like a promotion company, or whatever you want to call it. Whereas I feel like things at least seemed like they were kind of shared amongst whoever was putting on the hardcore stuff, whoever was putting on the pop punk stuff. Now it's very much like this venue does this music only. This venue
Right.
fuck with this crowd. Like it's kind of weird. So there's some places I used to spend like every weekend, when I was in college, that now I probably haven't stepped foot in like, I don't know how many years, just because the shows that I like going to aren't happening there anymore.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting how that kind of took over, because I could totally see that as well. I mean, even growing up in the scene I was in, like there was like one person who would book, and if you just showed up and said, "Here's my demo," and will you let me play something? They'd be like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like throw you on something. Or if you knew someone that was playing, that you could kind of get tossed around. I would see that a lot. But as far as like music, do you come from like a creative household, a musical household, like your parents play or
Um,
know how to play?
I wouldn't say musical in the sense that they're like musicians. I
Right.
feel like most people have like a guitar sitting around in the house or a piano sitting around in the house, which is
Mhm.
kind of my environment growing up. Yeah, my dad, when I was really young, I saw him as like a piano player, guitar player, and then by the time I was like 12, I think I was out playing him. Um,
Okay.
so I think it was more like campfire, just
Sure.
which nothing wrong with that. But definitely musical in the sense that like there was never like a silent moment probably in the house. Like I had a stay-at-home mom for most
Mhm.
of my life, so there was always music being played, well, whether she was cleaning or like helping us get lunches together for school. Um, there's just always shit going on.
Something happening. That's
Yeah,
cool. You said but you had a piano in the house and guitar because your dad
yeah,
could play those instruments.
yeah,
And were you put in, like, lessons or anything, or were
yeah.
you, younger?
I was put in piano lessons when I was like 4 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, super young. Which now I'm like grateful for.
Mhm.
'Cause I feel like nothing I do now would have manifested if I wasn't like almost forced into piano lessons at 4 years old.
Yeah.
And I went through that thing where like, you're a little kid, so you love anything that's presented to you for the most part. And then
Mhm.
I discovered the guitar, and the piano was not cool anymore. And now as like a 31-year-old, I've like come full circle. I'm like, I love
Back on the
piano.
piano.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
playing the piano. Yeah.
That's cool. So you kept with the piano up until you learned guitar, or was it just something that and now you know how to play obviously both of the instruments?
Yeah, it's funny, I like how I mentioned the guitar kind of being around in the house. I
Mhm.
We moved when I was like 10, just down the road, and then that guitar got like, you know, put in a case in storage somewhere. And I remember thinking one day, like, oh, like all my friends are learning guitar. Like, am I not cool because I'm going to piano lessons after school, every
Yeah.
day and Wednesday? Um, so I would come home on my lunch break when I was like 12 years old, 13 years old in elementary school, and just force myself to learn the music that was, on TV, the music videos that were playing.
Uh-huh.
Seven Army was probably like the song at the time where I'm like,
Oh,
I know
sure.
this. Yeah.
Oh, cool. So then, you kinda picked it up that way, at least guitar that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
then
then,
you said
when my dad saw I had interest in it, I think he was kind of like very stoked, like, oh yeah, I can like introduce him to classic rock and all this stuff.
yeah, that's rad. You were talking about going to shows, like, around 14 or so. Did you
Yeah.
start a band around that time, or were you in a band?
I think I think the first like band, which I think we played a talent show in like grade seven. We did an Adams song Blink cover, if you want to call that like
Nice.
first band ever. That was, and I'm pretty sure I like worked a guitar solo. Well, I'll call a guitar solo. I don't know if you could actually call it that. But yeah, that was the first time I was like, oh, this is like you can play music with your friends, and you don't have to be, super talented. It's just like a fun thing to do.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I played with a bunch of people in high school, and then some of those guys ended up, being in bands with me. What's now Locket. So yeah, I think I
Oh, wow. So some of
how
the
most
same
people
people
play.
played all the way through.
Yeah, not when we were going as safe to say.
Mhm.
For a while, our buddy was drumming with us, and it's a friend of mine. He's still in a bunch of bands that are popping off and doing some cool stuff. But we were in like a high school metalcore band together growing up, and then we kind of like did our own thing for a while, and then yeah, it was like 2014. Safe to say, needed a drummer because when everyone's coming up at that age, people are getting tour offers. And it's like, hey, I might jump ship to go play with this band because they want me to go to Europe.
Right,
It's
yeah.
around, and it was like a cool little reunion for a few years to be like, oh shit, we're doing this again.
That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah,
safe to say you guys played for a while together, right? I mean, before
yeah,
changing the name.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
With that, I don't know if you mind talking a little bit about that band,
yeah,
but
yeah,
just
for
I'm
sure.
just curious, like, when that band formed, and then, I mean, obviously you got signed with that band, and there's success there and then there's like a hiatus, and then this
Yeah,
band like restarted. But was safe to say a band that you started while you were like in college, or like when did that band
I
get
think I
together?
was, man, time's such a blur. I think I
Yeah.
was maybe 19 or 20.
Oh, okay.
So like just getting into college, just realizing that maybe college is not for me.
Oh, did you end up finishing college or going to
I switched. I was
university?
in university for 2 years, then I switched to college for a couple of years, and just like wasn't interested. And around that time too, the band was getting signed and tour offers were coming in, and it was kind of like I can go back to school if this is really what I want to pursue, or I can do this for a few years. So I put it on hold, and I'm very grateful for that because life kind of guided me in a direction where I've got a career outside of the band, but a career still in music now, which is definitely what I'd rather be doing than journalism or something like that.
Yeah, 100%. So the band was going, and then you were talking about tour offers and getting signed and everything. Was that were you so starting out? Were you guys just playing locally in Toronto, and then like how do you start getting eyes on you guys as far as like labels
Yeah.
and tour offers and stuff? Was it all kind of locally that the buzz was getting out
Um,
there?
we were, I think we were playing like a show every single weekend, maybe like 2 or 3 shows every single weekend for a year. It felt like,
Wow. Uh-huh.
um, just around Ontario or in Quebec and Montreal and stuff like that. Um, but I think because of the bands that were either adjacent to us or playing shows with us, starting to start their ascend into, I don't know, label world, international
Mhm.
tour world, like Seaway, like Pacific. Um, when Seaway asked us to do the split with them, which I think originally, when they did that split back in like 2012 or whenever that came out with us,
Mhm.
they were recommended not doing it with us. It was almost like, well, they're like, no one really knows this band. Like, you should do it with this band from the States. I think Knuckle Puck was a band that they were
Oh,
with,
interesting.
and they're like, nah, Knuckle Puck doesn't need the help of a
Uh,
split,
yeah, yeah.
and we were playing shows with Seaway. Like, they were probably with us every other weekend on a show. Um, so they asked us if we wanted to do a couple songs with that, and I think from there, that's, if you want to call it a fan base or whatever, word spread, I think, through that more than anything else at the time.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, also like just putting stuff out on Bandcamp, the Tumblr world was
Oh,
like
yeah.
a
That was
big help, I
huge.
think, for that 2013 like RFC era of like
Mhm.
emo crossover music. That I think kind of spread the word beyond whatever we were doing locally.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then you guys obviously signed and
Yep.
then continued on as a band for like what, 5 years or so after that?
Yeah. Yeah. Up until 2017. Um, Definitely not like touring as much as we could have, and not because of like a lack of our team like not doing what they could have been doing, but I think we were in a weird space where we were like trying almost to push ourselves like too hard in a direction that maybe we didn't need to go musically, where we didn't fit any sort of bill. uh
Mhm.
like too heavy to be on some of the pop punk stuff, too pop punk to be on some of the post hardcore stuff, too like this weird in between, um where we'd find ourselves on tour packages where we're always like the fucking weird the weird band, where
Oh,
the
interesting.
fans of the headline are kind of like, oh, this is like, why are they here?
Oh,
Like
man.
we do like, I don't know, direct support on like a hardcore weekend tour thing,
Mhm.
and everyone's crossed arms being like, why the fuck are they playing like a love song bat, like why is this band here? And
Yeah.
versa, we'd play like a straight up pop punk show, I guess playing like heavier alt rock stuff, and people would be like, cool, I guess, but like
Yeah.
I think from maybe a booking standpoint, that like put us in a weird spot. um but we still got to do a bunch of cool stuff, like we did Warp Tour, I guess the
Mhm.
second last year that was running, um
Oh, wow, you guys played the very last Warped Tour?
the second to last.
Oh, second to last, but that's still
2020.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So that was sick. And obviously, you do Warped Tour, you meet like
Million
a million
people.
people that we're
Yeah.
still close with. But yeah, I think just kind of reevaluating for those 2 years, like, okay, what do we actually like want to do? What's important to us musically? What's going to maybe put us in a better spot to be playing with the people we want to be playing with or playing in front of?
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Did that cause, like, for the band to kind of were you all kind of in different spaces where the direction of the band? Is that what kinda happened when
Kind
the
of.
hiatus happened?
Um,
Okay.
I think we were just like, I don't know. Everyone has, I feel like in any band, an idea of, you could all talk about what you all want together as a group, but on a personal level, like you all want different things.
Sure.
more often than not. Um, and I think that was like having a few members butt heads for a while.
Mhm.
So I think it was easier to just like pump the brakes and chill for a couple of years without like the added pressure of you need to have a record done at this time. You need to have touring plans set in motion for this time. It kind of gave us a little breathing room to be like, oh, we can like we can take 5 years writing music if we want. Like
Yeah.
there's really no pressure to do any one thing, which is
Okay.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And so once you guys, had the hiatus or kind of split up as a band, and were you all still kind of playing together? Like, how did you then form Locket and then put something out 2 years later?
Yeah. Three out of the four of us, our bass player at the time, we parted ways with him. And I don't think he's done anything musically since. But Corey, our guitarist, and I spent like maybe 50 days out of a summer together, just writing music with no intention of like putting necessarily all of it out or having it be on a record versus an EP or something. It was just kind of like, hey, you want to make music, make it fun again.
Mhm.
Because the last release we did, as safe to say, is probably collectively the thing that we like, I don't want to say hate the most, but we were kind of forced into a situation where we had tour offers come in, Warp Tour being one of them. And it was like, well, guys, I know you were not planning on putting out a full length for maybe a year, but if there's a time to do it, you're going to have like the Warp Tour audience, their eyes are going to be on you. So you might want to put together like 10 songs or more. So it was super rushed. And listening back to it now, I'm like, yeah, like we had to throw these songs together in a matter of like months, which is so not the way that we work. I feel like we're probably notorious for like taking way too long working on music. Um,
Yeah. But I mean, that would be difficult, right? Because the Warped Tour has such a massive amount of
yeah,
people showing
totally.
up, and that is a bill where it's pop punk and hardcore. I mean, it's so wide
Yeah,
of
yeah,
a spectrum of people showing up to it. Um, that makes sense to want to have something to be like, oh, I just saw this band. Like, where's their merch little tent? I'm gonna go check
yeah,
out the record. But yeah, I could see that being rough to be like, okay, now it's like, let's crank out 10 songs or more, 15 songs just to have something. So when we go on the road, uh, people
totally.
will know who we are, or they could
Yeah,
leave with something.
there's maybe like one or two songs on there that listening now we're like, yeah, like those feel like something I'm still proud to have out there. There's other songs that we just like giggle, to ourselves when we're
Yeah,
hanging out
a
now. We're like,
filler,
look what we're
yeah, or
thinking. Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, totally.
Okay. And then yeah, so then the hiatus happens, and then you and Corey. It sounds like we're writing songs that with no intention of, okay, this is
Yeah,
going to be a new band or this is going to be a project. It was just, let's just have fun and
yeah,
write.
yeah,
A-
100%.
And then at what point are you like, you know what, this is like really cool. Let's move. We should try to grab other people and move forward with this.
I think that's a good question. I think we maybe had like 5 songs or 6 songs as well. I think this is a huge part too, and this is going to sound so weird, but because we self-engineer and produce and like do everything in-house, the writing is typically happening as the recording is happening because we have the luxury of like Corey working and basically like running a commercial studio. So it had been like years like it had been years since we had been in a room with like instruments like writing music as opposed to sitting in front of a studio desk writing music.
Okay.
Whereas this was very much like, yo, you want to just like throw up the drum kit and like write songs like a band probably should. um and I think that like helps kind of, it helped us understand what energy we like playing. um we weren't able to force anything because you're not like, you don't have the luxury of sitting in front of the computer all the time clicking buttons and moving stuff around and chopping stuff up to like get things perfect. It's just kind of like, all right, we're going to play these 3 power chords for 3.5 minutes. And that's just, where I think if we were younger, if I was younger anyways, I would have been like, oh, it's like musically it's not deep enough. But you get to a point where like it's not about that. If like this is how we write music, this is how we write music.
Yeah. So do you feel
So I think
like,
that,
sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to
yeah,
interrupt.
I was just gonna say, I think around that time we're like, hey, like we could do, if we could do 5 more songs, in this way where we're just like, sure, the mics are up, but we're kind of just jamming and like working through the ideas like we used to forever ago. um I think that maybe we can like put out a record. Like that was, I think, maybe the first instance thought of that. And then
Yeah.
from there, we had like a SoundCloud link with a pre-mix of these like 10 songs we'd thrown together, maybe like 8 songs at the time. And we were just sharing it with friends, and all of them like, are you stupid? Like, why are you not releasing this? Like, why do you just have this music sitting collecting dust?
Yeah. Is that the same process you all do now with the band, as far as sitting in a room or sitting, at his house and recording and just kind of coming up with stuff together, or is it back more to what you were doing with
um
the previous band?
I guess it's circumstantial because of the pandemic, right?
Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah,
That
like
that because
this
that happens. You put
and
out
this and
music in
yeah,
2019, and then okay, so let's get into that. Sorry.
yeah. So
Moving
I think
ahead.
so many people are like, oh man, I'm so excited for the new record. And the 4 of us are like, the new record, like we started working on this 3 years ago. Like it's
Oh
old
my
news to us.
gosh. Yeah.
Um,
Wow. Okay.
yeah, like Sonic Bloom, I think I have a demo on my old MacBook from like January 20th, 2020, like a long
Whoa.
time ago. But that was just kind of like, well, all right, the world shut down. Like, which
What
to
are you gonna
us,
do? Yeah.
it was kind of like, oh, this is kind of fun. Like we can just get back into writing music, because I think collectively that's the thing we like doing the most. Like we love playing shows. Yeah, and touring can be cool, but touring can also suck. I'm sure I can speak for most people that it's like super, super grueling. So the creative side of it, just like writing music together and recording music is really fun. So Corey spent Corey's wife is from Brazil originally, and she was living in Canada. And then during the pandemic, they were living in Brazil for months and months. So it was a lot of me demoing stuff, sending it to Corey, um, him making his contributions, just kind of bouncing stuff back and forth, because primarily the two of us are the ones that kind of write the bulk of the music.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think the first day we saw Corey since he came back from Brazil, which I think at that point was like a year into the pandemic. It had been so long. It was like, all right, let's go to the basement. Like, let's fire up the studio and start getting the ideas out. So it was like a little mix, which I think was great, because it gave us time to listen to some demos and think, you know what, this isn't good enough, or this isn't really like what I'm feeling anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and as well as like getting in the room together, having already listened to stuff kind of pre-demoed, to be like, oh, like this doesn't feel right playing a song like this, or this
Mhm.
guitar part doesn't quite feel like natural to do live,
Mhm.
let's adjust and let's rewrite. So it was a mixed bag of doing stuff from home, doing stuff like in the studio, doing stuff in the live room, just jamming.
Yeah. Do you feel like, I mean, that must have changed the album quite a bit if you or because if it was the first take and you send it over and then Corey does his thing and it comes back and you record it and then it's like, okay, well, that one's done. At least at this point, you had obviously the time to sit on the songs,
Yeah,
listen to them a lot more. And then you'd be like, you know what? It would be cool if we went this direction or if we took
100%.
this piece out. Yeah.
There are a few songs where there's like 6 different versions of the song,
Oh, wow. Really?
where things would like, I think Corey too, he's like super pragmatic, and he's like the engineer slash, like he's going to be mixing the music. So I think he doesn't want to get too ahead of himself, committing to like, a cool guitar tone if he knows it's just going to like bite him in the ass later, not wanting
Mhm.
to do something. So I think we tracked originally everything DI, like all the guitars DI, for the whole record. So that way he thought, I'd have the flexibility of really dialing things in.
Yeah. And kind of
Then,
changing whatever amp sounds or whatever
yeah.
you wanted to
And
do.
I think up like a couple months into that, he was like, yo, this all sounds like it's missing the energy of just like playing in front of an amp, or like
Uh-huh.
running it through, the stuff we use live and stuff. So then we tried reamping stuff, and it still felt like robotic almost. So then we retracked again. Like we retracked guitars, I feel like maybe 6 times.
Oh,
We
wow.
blew up amps. It like it was the longest process, but a lot of that was writing a song, um, and then kind of stripping things back and adding in elements that were like, okay, how do we like push the sound forward without straying too much? So we
Mhm.
kind of like threw all these like crazy ideas at the songs, And then once, 100 new things were layered on top, we thought, okay, now what doesn't need to be there? What can we peel off and bring it back to like normal band world?
Mm.
Because there were some songs that were like, there's electronic shit flying everywhere and synth stuff. And then we realized like, oh, pull that back, pull that back. We don't need that.
Yeah. You have it all there and you can, kind of then mute stuff and see what you want to
Yeah.
keep and what you want.
Yeah. I think we still wanted it to feel like, like a rock record. Like, you can, a lot of friends of ours are doing like super cool stuff. Whether it's like the pop punk stuff, incorporating the synths and the saxophones and all this stuff. But I think for us, when we were trying to do that stuff, it just didn't feel like band music. It almost felt like overproduced.
Mm-hmm.
So even like a song like Kill Year, in the music video, you can see like the intro guitar parts are actually like samples of us playing the live guitar parts. Cause our whole idea was if we're going to sample stuff and use like electronic elements, it still needs to feel alive. Like it's still got to have a human touch to it.
Yeah.
So that was our way of kind of going about, placing all these extra things in the record.
That's awesome. With Safe to Say, were you all doing the same? Like, was Corey producing, or like, were you guys? Was it all in house at that point, or is this a new endeavor?
Corey produced our Hiding Games EP, which is probably like the batch of songs that like kind of opened every door for us. And he was not part of the band at that time. He was just like, he was just some like weird guy that we like met through mutual friends. But he just had so many ideas and he was like able to execute them in a way that was like, it was almost impossible to not ask him to be in the band, because it's like having a secret weapon on your team, right? It's like, oh, we can really do whatever we want if we have a guy like this. And we were down a guitarist because our current bass player, who was playing guitar in Safe to Say at the time, he like put things on pause to get his degree in university. So it's like, well, Trav's out of the picture right now. Safe to say, like, Corey, I know you live 5 hours away, but we kind of only practice when we need to tour anyway. So you want to.
Oh, okay.
So everything since then has been with Corey. But I think this current record has been the most like 50-50 split between him and I producing stuff, which has been cool. And I think it probably made it more enjoyable for him, where like the load is not all in his court.
Yeah. Wow. Is this the first time you've really produced a lot on the album as well?
Yeah, in terms of like actually like being in the box.
Yeah.
Like, doing stuff. Yeah.
Awesome. That must have been a kind of a cool change of pace, I'd imagine.
Yeah, dude. Like I said, it probably made his job easier and made my life easier too, where you're like, you have an idea and you're trying to communicate it to someone, and like, 9 times out of 10, it's going to get miscommunicated, or like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
So it was way easier to be like, you know what, I'll just do it and then I'll send it to you.
That's cool.
I think there were moments where I'd ask him to do something and he would just say like, can you just do it yourself? I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. With that first album, with All Out, was that the batch of songs that you had done just the two of you together, or a majority of those, and then kind of added to the band at that point?
There were a few that were just the two of us. I'm trying to think which ones. The song Other People, maybe the last song on the record, at least the bulk of the last song on the record until maybe 2 minutes in, were just Corey and I. But a lot of it were just ideas, like a vocal melody, or he'd be like, hey, I wrote this chorus, but maybe we don't use the singing. Maybe we just use like the guitar lead from it.
Okay.
That was primarily a band effort, more so than probably anything else we've done, which is cool. Yeah, I think that was a lot of just jamming, figuring things out. Like I said, it was pre-pandemic, right? Where
you could actually get everybody together,
in a room, as opposed to this current album where everyone was stuck all over the place. Yeah.
Okay. And then with the new album, like, are you guys like, have you, because it's been such a long period, I mean, at what time or was it once Corey got back and you had time to sit on the record for a while and then retrack everything? Was that when it kind of got solidified as like, this is going to be the album, here are the songs, and this is what we're going to do? Yeah,
I think so.
Okay.
And that's still months after Corey being back and us making multiple trips to Ottawa, where his studio is, to just work on a few songs here and there. The way we track is, I don't know if this is like industry standard now. Years ago, it was so not the way to do things, but we do drums dead last. Like we don't record drums at all until the very end of the recording process.
Oh,
Um,
I don't know anything about, like, as far as that goes. I'm just a fan, but from what I can recall is that you would do drums first.
yeah. So I don't know who we learned this from. Maybe it was one of the 4-year guys, or maybe it was this. Oh, you know what? There's this guy named Derek Hoffman from Toronto who's like a Juno nominated genius. Junos are like the
Yeah,
Canadian.
the Grammy of, Canada.
He was in a pop rock band actually when I was going to local shows, and he's just the guy now that does everything huge in Canada. He's very much a songwriter first, I think, and then producer second.
Mhm.
That's how I see his brain working. And I think he was the first person I heard of doing drums last. And the reason for that was, you don't want to have an awesome drum recording, and they're so tedious to do. Like you got to set up your microphones and remember your presets and whatever.
Yeah.
Uh, I think his idea was, what if you come up with an amazing vocal melody and guitar change after you've already committed your drums? Like you want them to all mesh
Be
together
in
and
sync,
like
yeah, then
be
it would
super in sync.
screw everything up.
Yeah. As opposed to having like, oh, we got to remake the drums and you know.
Yeah,
So
add the couple crashes here
yeah,
that would make this sound better.
we would write, I guess, with an E kit or just putting in our MIDI stuff. And there were like a handful of moments on the new record where the vocal would totally inform what everything else is doing. I forget why I'm even talking about doing drums last.
No, I was just curious about, like, how the album kinda came together.
Oh
I can't
yeah.
remember either, but it's that's interesting.
Yeah. So I
Oh,
think
yeah,
that,
knowing you had to go do that, you guys would do it that way.
yeah. So I think it was making sure everything was sounding good on our end, sending it to, our label to be like, hey, does this, are we crazy? Have we lost our minds? Does this sound like a record? Can
Yeah.
we record drums now, please? Because that's always like, I think aside from us redoing the guitars a billion times, that's the thing that gives it like the rock band feel, right? Is like having the real drum kit, not having the fake sample drums in there. And then it was like, oh yeah, okay, this feels like a record finally. I feel like you work on something long enough, it's really easy to just like lose your mind a little bit and kind of second guess, like, is this actually sick? I don't know.
Yeah, you've been hearing it so many times, it's almost
Yeah.
like you get, like, it almost just becomes something that you can't even. It's like I've heard other artists that'll say, like, I'll write or something and put it down and then not even, like, come back to it for, like, a couple weeks. So then you
Yeah,
have
that's
kind of like a fresh
that's a smart thing to do.
ears on it and be like, "Oh," you might not hear something because you're just your brain is just trained to, like,
Yeah,
listen to it this way.
totally.
Um, that's awesome. Are you doing a tour or anything to support it?
I mean, ideally, I feel like that would be in our best interest. Probably it's what the label would want. But and this is something we've been like super open about. I think with the pandemic almost consuming like 3 years of our
Uh-huh.
life, that's a long time when you're in your late 20s. Like stuff outside of the band starts snowballing really quickly. Um, when we started writing this record, we all had girlfriends, and now 3 out of 4 of us have wives. And
Oh, wow.
like 2 out of the 4 of us have mortgages and own houses, and like adult life outside the band has kind of caught up with us in a way.
Uh-huh.
We've been very open about the fact that, we're super proud of this music and we love playing shows, but if we're going to be on the road, it needs to make sense because we have families to support and we have shit going on outside
Yeah,
of.
you're not 19 again where you could just get in
No,
the
no.
van and play at every whatever teen center you could find.
Totally. Yeah. And I think like at least for myself, your whole identity is wrapped up in a band when you are like a band person as a young 20 something year old,
Mhm.
where that is everything. And when you get almost I guess a glimpse of having that taken away for a few years and you realize, oh, like I am more than just, the music I present to people. I'm like more than this band name that shows up on Instagram every once in a while or plays a show here and there. That was almost like a good thing in a way because it
Mhm.
it made us have like a deeper appreciation for doing the band, right? When you realize it can just kind of go away so quickly.
Yeah.
And that like if it does go away, you know, be proud and like grateful for you still being able to do it. Like Corey always says, you know, I am not a band guy. I'm a guy who plays in a band, and it is no longer the priority. It's the cherry on top of like all this amazing stuff we get to do. And
Yeah.
I specifically, like we work full time, like making music essentially, like as our careers. And even though it's not really anything like band related, I feel like we wouldn't have those doors open for us had we not, you know, spent 10 years grinding it out and playing shows and meeting people and making connections and doing all that stuff. So to get to like, you know, have a record that's funded and do shit like that, like that's the coolest shit.
Yeah. And especially by a cool label, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because it's like once everyone kind of had the touring aspect of it removed or really taken away 100%,
Yeah,
it's like you had to kind of adapt or okay, now what do we do
yeah,
now that touring is not a piece of this? Like, how do we, make a living? Like,
yeah,
what
yeah,
does that look like moving forward?
yeah.
So that was probably something that you guys all had to, obviously you all had to figure out at one point.
Oh, big time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mentioned earlier that went to university wasn't for me, went to college wasn't for me. It was, I'm not gonna lie, definitely like panic mode for a good year,
Yeah,
pandemic
I
where it's
bet.
like, oh shit, businesses are closed too. Like you can't even get a part-time job in retail because nothing's going
Right.
on. Like, um, I think that really forced myself, I can probably speak for Corey as well, to be like, okay, music is the thing that's proven to be something I can excel at. How do I how do I make this my job? Or like how can I make money doing this? You know, we're not in bands to make money. Like very few friends of ours that are even playing to thousands of people a night are like
Making money,
not making
right.
substantial money to able, you know, to be able to like buy a house in a place like we live where houses are like cost $1 million for like a 2 bedroom
Y
bungalow. You know?
right, right, right.
So yeah, I think that, I mean, outside of the band, that gave us like a good 2 year, 3 year window to like really sharpen our toolkits to be like, okay, how do I how do I profit off this finally?
Right.
Um yeah, so Corey, I don't even remember if this is necessarily what you were asking, but Corey more or less just like mixes music for people. Songwrites here and there, but like the bulk of what he does is mixing, and he gets so many clients that I think he has employees now that like
Wow, that's
do stuff
huge.
for him. Um,
Yeah.
which is sweet. And I'm sure just like I could probably say the same thing. I'm sure he gets a handful of projects where he's like banging his head on the wall, like, oh, I don't want to work on this today. But at
Right.
the end of the day, you look at it like, okay, well, I'm getting paid to make music, and that's, you know, that's such a
Yeah,
rarity.
that's what not a lot of people have that opportunity, right? I mean, just be to be able to still work within the industry and do what you love to do. Like you said, yeah, the band isn't we didn't start it to make money or even what you're doing, but like once you get if you're married and you get older, like you have to have a place to live, you have to
Mhm.
feed your family. I mean, these are all like realities, right? It's
Yeah.
not like
And, you know
you're
what?
like, I
We
want to
have
be
like,
rich and famous,
yeah,
like, but I
exactly.
want to be able to like not starve to death.
And we have friends that, you know, are our age or older that are in the same spot as us, but they're in bands that have already like, you know, hit a good spot where they can be on tour and bring home enough to like
Enough.
be the, you know, the partner bringing in 50% of whatever you're trying to do in your household
Uh-huh.
situation. We're very aware that like if we go on tour, we're not direct support. You know, if we are direct support, it's like a tour that's you know, we might be paying out of pocket on a couple shows because the drives are longer than what we're gonna make in merch or
Right.
whatever. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, if we do tour this record, I'm sure it's gonna be something the label has in mind where it's got to be like worthwhile. It's got to be a thing that's not gonna make it the last tour we ever do where we come home broke and we're like, I can't pay my bills, I'm fucked.
Right,
Uh,
right. Like we all hate each other now that we had to like deal with this. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like, that
And
makes
because
sense.
it is the cherry on top, like that I think was the most important thing where we don't want it to be an unenjoyable thing. We've spent 10 years doing the band stuff where
Yeah.
we've been stuck on the road for weeks at a time, wishing it was like time to come home. Don't want that to be the case. We want it to feel like vacation, you know?
Yeah. What do you if I don't know if you even wanted to answer this question, but because I'll cut it out if that's but what are you doing songwriting production or something within the industry or doing something totally
Yeah.
different?
I'm doing a bit of like artist production stuff on the side. The bulk of what I do is actually music for media, like composing for
Oh, rad.
commercial stuff like that.
That's a cool gig. That's
Dude,
really cool.
it's the best. It's
That's
really cool.
awesome.
And I was actually this is funny. I get the band thing comes into play because I was talking to a friend of mine who's like a music director that
Mhm.
essentially works adjacent to ad agencies. You know, you got a big like Apple commercial or Ford commercial or whatever. They're the one who kind of like guides the project. So I
Yeah.
report to them. And she was saying, you know, it almost works to your benefit that you come from the band world because they just see you as like a lot cooler than you are. You know, I'm like, oh man, if they only knew.
Well,
Or
yeah, you obviously bring a different perspective and everything.
yeah,
Yeah, a buddy of mine does music supervision for like television shows, but
cool.
he started on the
Yeah.
radio. Like I was on the radio for 15 years before this podcast started
Yep.
doing anything. Um, but he's got that perspective of like he could hear a song and know if it's gonna work, or like he could
Yeah.
find a hit that maybe will cost you way less than Jimmy World song or whatever if it was for a commercial or something.
Yeah.
So
100%.
that's cool. That's a kind of I'm sure that's a really rewarding thing and cool and creative thing that you get to do with
Oh
that.
yeah.
I just curious on the you mentioned Lake Pacific earlier
Yeah.
and you kind of tagged them in your Instagram profile. Are you playing with that band or like what is your
Yeah.
involvement?
So in 2017, when I put STS on hold, uh,
Uh-huh.
when we did Warp Tour, we shared a bandwagon with like Pacific. And like I said, that's a band that was kind of helping us out when we were
Yeah, when you
young.
guys are coming up, right?
Um, their bass player and them were parting ways again because he was like getting older and wanted to just like chill, have a family, buy a house, do that thing.
Mhm.
Um, and they kind of just asked, "Hey, do you want to fill in on a tour and possibly just join the band?" Not much to ask, which I was hesitant at first, just because the last year of the STS stuff was like not crazy enjoyable for me. It was a little stressful.
Mhm.
Um, but I said yes because I thought, well, I'm playing bass. Like I'm not going to have much responsibility here. It's not even in my brain. It's not my band. So, you know,
Right.
we're going to do the job, but like I don't need to worry about all the little things. Um, and touring with that band has been amazing. Like it's always been so much fun. I haven't done anything with them really in a year. I think half the band hasn't. Again, just because adult life has like caught up, and during the pandemic, two of the other guys like bought houses. And now it's like I can't afford to. I can't
Yeah,
afford to
tour. Same situation
months
as
of the
you.
year if I
Yeah.
have mortgages to pay. Um, but it's great because we just have this like steady rotation of people that can cover for us if need be. So yeah, I worked on their last record with them, and whenever I'm able to, I'm playing shows or on the road with them. But just the way the last year has gone, where I'm in like career mode or Locket mode, like
Yeah.
the priority, and they understand that. So I usually have like two or three people filling in for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool that you gotta, yeah, do both and
Mhm.
probably get a little bit of that tour piece out of you if you get a chance to jump on like a shorter run, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's nice too where I feel like STS and Locket, I've always been called like the band captain. I'm kind of like helming the ship.
Yeah.
I'm the one stressing and worrying about like every little thing. And the like Pacific stuff is nice because even though I'm in that band now, there's a part of my brain that doesn't ever see it as my band. I see it as like Jordan Black's band. I see it as Tate Ewart's band. Like I'm just
You're
there
just
to
a part of it. Yeah.
I'm just there to show up and do the job. And then it leaves my mind the second we're done playing a show or something important.
Yeah. Cause at this band, you're like the quarterback, so to speak, of like,
Yeah.
organizing everything and songwriting, doing everything. And then it's like
I'm just
that's
kicking
probably
field goals on the other
yeah,
band.
the other team, you're like, put me in, coach, and then just play, and then you're out.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool, man. Well, I appreciate your time today, Brad. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, of course, man. It was nice to chat.
I have one more quick question for you before I let you go. I want to know if you have any advice for aspiring artists.
Any advice? God, where do I begin? uh,
Take your time. I'm just saying a quick
yeah,
question just to say it.
yeah. No,
But
I honestly like. I think starting a band is the coolest thing, most helpful thing you could do. Because outside of just making music, like you're gonna make friends. Yeah, you're hopefully gonna land in a community with people that are gonna be around you forever. And I met my wife through friends of going to shows. Like there's just like these little things where I feel like being in a band and putting yourself in a scene like that is like one of the coolest things you could do as a musician.
Bringing it backward.